Well, there's only a few people at this point.
Yeah, I think we could wait a couple minutes for everyone to join. But there is that to the side that I think everyone can see.
So I can ask an innocuous question. I'm coming to you from South Florida, and it is a gorgeous 68 degrees here today, which is actually very cold for us, but it is beautiful. How is the weather where you are?
That's not an innocuous question. That's very mean.
All right. I said obnoxious, not innocuous.
It's gonna hit
I'm in
90 in
Boston.
San Diego today.
Wow.
Is it really?
Yeah, we're having what's called the Santa Ana, which is where hot wind blows from the
Oh.
desert, and it's like desert conditions.
I learned about those when I read the book Seabiscuit, and they talked about the winds in that book.
Yeah, I would say it's probably about just under 50 here in DC, and that's warmer than it's been in as long as I can remember. But it is sunny outside, which I will take happily.
Yeah.
Cold and gray in Boston.
Crystal, where are you?
I am in New York, and it is a lovely, like 45, I will say, which is, funny to say, but we're enjoying the sun and the melting snow and hoping that there are not 6 more weeks of winter. We're up to 18. So we'll give everyone like 5 minutes maybe.
Good. It's pretty fantastic that the internet allows us to have a panel with people in Florida and San Diego and Boston and New York and DC. That's pretty amazing.
It's really the benefit of, when you try to find the silver lining in anything,
Right.
right? There's been a lot of silver linings that came out of what's happened in the last couple of years. Speaking for myself, my daughter moved from New York back to Florida to have my grandchild. So, that made me super happy.
Yeah. And
Very big silver lining.
thank you all for bearing with me on my first Zoom webinar. I did not know that these tech skills would be things that I would be adding to my resume this year.
We're all learning together. It's all good. Crystal, you want to wait like another minute or so? It looks like we're still
Yeah,
filtering
everyone's
in.
piling in, which is great.
Okay. Sounds good. Don't worry, we're not awkwardly being quiet. All right, I think we should get started maybe. Is that okay with everybody? And then we'll still let people, stragglers come on in. So first and foremost, welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for joining this afternoon. If you were here a few minutes ago, you'll know that we have 5 faces on your screen from 5 different locations across the country. Mentorship is nationwide. What can I say? My name is Jonah Perlin. I'm a professor at Georgetown Law School. I'm also lucky enough to be on the board of the Legal Mentor Network, with many of these fine folks. And I'm grateful to be moderating today so we can all learn. I know I have plenty to learn about being a good mentor, and we have incredible panelists to do it. So thank you for being here. Before we sort of get started with the formal program, I thought I would turn it over to Crystal to just say hello and also talk a little bit about the logistics of the Legal Mentor Network before we get started. So Crystal, over to you.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Jonah. And thank you everyone for joining us. Today, my name is Crystal Morrow. I'm the director of the Legal Network and a co-founder with Brian Potts. We wanted to put together this webinar because we've had a lot of interest in being mentors, and also a lot of questions coming in about what we expect from the mentors and how to be a good mentor. So we thought that this very astute and experienced panel would be the best way to kind of get the conversation started. We are an organic mentoring network, so we really don't have any rules at this time about your relationship with your mentees, but we just wanted to give you a heads up that we ask our mentors to take on 5 mentees a year, which sounds like a lot, but really isn't, because as I find some of the mentees, just want minutes of your time. Some of them want to have an ongoing relationship. So everyone has different needs, and even though it might seem overwhelming at first to get an influx of emails from mentees, really it balances out over time. And we also wanted to give you a heads up that we give each of the mentees 2 mentors. So you're not, their only lifeline. They have other resources, and they might have that they're interested in litigation and IP. So maybe you're their litigation mentor, but someone else is their IP mentor, and you don't have to be their everything. So that's just some of the basics that we're working with right now. And we hope you, get your input and experience and grow the program.
Awesome. Thanks, Crystal. And if you have not yet signed up and you're interested, where can people find us online, Crystal?
Yes. You can email us at info@legalmentornetwork.org, or go to our website, legalmentornetwork.org, and find us there. And you can also find us on LinkedIn too. Same name, Legal Mentor Network. Please reach out.
Absolutely. Yeah, so let's get started. I'm so excited, as I said, to be here and to get to ask some questions. If you have questions at any point about the Zoom, or you'd like to get your question in the queue sort of for the end, you can use the Q&A function on the bottom right corner of your Zoom if it looks like mine. I'll start it by asking a few questions, but I hope we'll have some time for audience questions as well. So to start, I'm going to introduce Dr. Sharon Meet Abrahams. And Dr. Abrahams is coming to us, as she said earlier, from South Florida. And I'll let her introduce herself. And I'm also going to ask her to talk a little bit about sort of why mentor, right? We know you're here because you have some interest in it, we hope. But I think it's important before you start saying how mentor to sort of ask the question why. And so Dr. Abrahams is going to start that conversation.
Thank you, Jonah, and thank you, Crystal. It's such a pleasure to be here. One of the co-founders, Brian, and I have known each other for, 11 or 12 years, and I'm so excited that this has grown organically and to be a part of this. So thank you very much. So to answer Jonah's question, why mentor? If any of you follow me online on LinkedIn, I kept putting out there, it's one of the greatest gifts you can give to another person. There's mentoring in high schools, and there's mentoring in college, and you could be mentored in all kinds of things in your life. And we're specifically talking about mentoring lawyers, right? I have spent 30 years in law firms, designing, running, mentoring programs, working with attorneys, helping them to be successful and happy in their careers. So this is something I'm really, really passionate about. And I want to just start with saying the first thing a mentor gets out of being a mentor is a sense of pride. It will make you feel good that you've mentored somebody else. Remember that high school teacher that you went back to after you graduated college and you told the high school teacher, I did it, I graduated college, because that high school teacher helped you? that's the kind of pride you will feel in seeing another person being successful. If you are a younger lawyer who's looking to mentor, it's going to help you develop your leadership skills. Helping another person, guiding them, and giving them vision and direction is part of being a good leader. So it's a wonderful way for you to develop your leader skills while you're helping somebody else. Believe it or not, you know the saying, those who can't teach, those who can't do, teach. Not saying anything about you, Jonah, at all. All right. But what it does when you mentor is that it reinforces, and when you teach, it also reinforces your knowledge, your skills as a lawyer. So when somebody's asking you, how would you handle a matter or a case, you're thinking about your knowledge and your abilities, and you're sharing that. So it reinforces that, and that makes you feel good about your own practice. So that's a little bit of a win-win. Another thing is, if you mentor within this group, or you mentor in any other type of civic association or whatever, you get what's called a good reputation. This is somebody that other people want to go to, ask for help, guidance. And who wouldn't want that? I call it karma, getting good karma, giving out good karma. It comes back to you in that way. But an interesting little thing has to do with legacy. Think about that for a minute. The lawyers that you have read about or have heard about, either in school or now that you're practicing, for those of you who are practicing or thinking about becoming a mentor, you're thinking of the person who mentored you, and you're carrying on their legacy. So if you become a mentor, somebody else will be carrying on your legacy. And then the last one, which I have to say because of all of our discussion at the beginning, if you were with us, dealing with technology, mentees can teach you. They can mentor up and help you with things that you need to become better and more efficient in your practice related to technology and LinkedIn and all of those things. So we do learn from the people that we are helping them up. They'll teach you something new. So those are all reasons why you want to join us and become a mentor. So with that, Jonah, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Awesome. So now that we talked a little bit about the why, let's talk a little bit about the how. And for that, I'm going to introduce our two other panelists, Heather Stevenson and Matt Schwartz. And, I think what I'd like you both to do is just briefly introduce yourself, and then I'll throw some questions out to the group. So Heather, how about you go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Heather Stevenson, and I'm Deputy General Counsel of Boston Globe Media Partners. And I'm also privileged to be on the board of the Legal Mentor Network. Mentoring has been a huge part of my career, and I'm really privileged to be part of this group that's helping set that up for all of you and others.
And I'll just add for Heather, if you're not already connected to her on LinkedIn, you absolutely should be. I've been learning a ton from her posts about mentoring and networking and in-house lawyering and everything else in between. So we're glad to have you. Matt?
Yeah, my name is Matt Schwartz. I'm a partner at DLA Piper. I was fortunate to get looped in at the nascent stages of the Legal Mentor Network last year, and to have been one of the first people, I guess, to volunteer to mentor. I've mentored several dozen people over the last year, and it's been an unbelievable experience for me. Happy to be on the advisory board for the Mentor Network, and do anything we can to sort of push forward the efforts to increase connectivity amongst new lawyers, aspiring lawyers, and people who can give them career guidance.
Fantastic. And I'll say you should also follow Matt on LinkedIn, learning a ton from him on there. But Matt, I'm going to start with you, and then we can sort of work around with the first question, which is about time, right? You're a partner at a big law firm. I see some, what I think are baseball bats behind you. I know you also are an active baseball coach for your family. How do you make time for networking? How do you fit it in, both sort of intellectually, but also just practically and emotionally into your regular life?
Yeah, so I think the key is, as a mentor, to probably pick certain hours of the day where you offer up your time. And so, for instance, I drop my kids off at school every day. I drop the second one off at 8:30. So 8:30 to 9 and 9 to 9:30 are two times that I've offered up to people. It's first thing in the morning. it's hopefully before anything crazy has happened. One of those calls I'm in the car for, but I think doing calls, especially as a parent of young children, trying to do these mentoring calls while you're in the car driving from one place to another is just a really convenient time to do it. Sometimes your mentee wants to Zoom and be on video and you can't do it that way, but you have to find pockets of time that work for you, the ones that are the least disruptive to the rest of your schedule, whether it's a half hour right before lunch, half hour right before you work out, right after. Pick that period of time on certain days and then just offer, put those blocks of time aside if you can, and offer those up to your mentees when they ask. That's I think the best way to fit it in, because there really is no other way to do it. If you don't pick a designated time in which you're going to let people avail themselves to speaking with you.
Heather, sure.
I want to jump in and say that like the commuting time, if any of you walk on a treadmill, go outside, you're in a place where you can actually go outside and walk, you might talk on the phone to your mom, for 15 minutes. That's also another time that you can say, all right, I'm going to mentor you while I'm walking. And you tell them, you might hear noises outside or whatever, but you're relaxed. You're in a good state of mind when you're out there walking. I wouldn't do it when you're running. That would be a little difficult, but getting some fresh air and mentoring at the same time is a win-win.
Totally agree with everything that Matt and Sharon both said. The one thing that I would sort of add, although they both suggested it, is that, remember what you're there for. You're there to mentor, which is a little bit different than a lot of business type meetings you might have. So if you don't want to be on Zoom, or you are sweaty and gross because you just worked out, or you are in a place that doesn't look the greatest, as long as it's private so that you're not kind of accidentally sharing any confidential information, that's fine. You're there to share what you know and provide your perspective. And so if you don't look like the, put together professional that you might for a client, that's really okay.
Can I ask a question, Jonah? Do you mind if I jump in and ask a question? Have the two of you ever mentored really just like via email, where they emailed you a question or a thought and you could think about it and then get back to them at any time? Has that ever worked out?
I have never had a situation that is exclusively on email. I have always started with a conversation and sometimes moved to email. My preference is a 100% for conversations as opposed to email. They're so much more efficient. And I feel like you really need to, or I feel pressure to give a really polished response over email in a way that I don't feel providing guidance verbally.
Yeah, I've never started via email, but I think email is a good tool for follow-up. For instance, this week I had a first call with a new mentee who has a summer associate position at a different law firm in a very specific area of practice. And she had asked me, as one of the things we talked about, do you think there's any primers for this kind of work? And then after we got off the call, I emailed another partner of mine who I know does that kind of work. And a day later, he got back to me with some materials. And so I emailed those to her, and then we had a bit of an exchange on it. But it's really more of a follow-up rather than the initial contact. I think, at a minimum, you should have a phone call or a Zoom or some other type of, GoToMeeting or Teams, whatever you want. But it should be live the first time you talk to someone.
Yeah, and I guess the only follow-up I have is, are there times when you feel like your schedule doesn't sort of mesh with your mentee's schedule, especially if there's, time zones and everything else? How have you negotiated that? I mean, the answer just may be we've negotiated it, but I guess I'm curious if you have any other thoughts just on sort of finding that right time.
I've noticed most mentees are either in law school or are eager to talk and are generally very flexible. I haven't had one yet where we haven't been able to find a time that works, whether it's early in the morning, late at night. Sometimes I've scheduled it during lunch hour or something else. But eventually it works itself out if they want it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, then maybe we can talk about sort of that first call, right? I mean, a lot of people on here are going to have are just getting names by email. In fact, I'm meeting with a brand new mentee tomorrow. Talk me through sort of what you're trying to gain out of that first call, what kind of questions you ask, what kind of questions you encourage your mentees to ask to sort of start the relationship on the right foot.
I'll go first if you want. I think mentees need to come to these meetings prepared to tell their story. The same way you'd come to an interview prepared to tell your story, they should be prepared to give us their elevator pitch, right? We call it, which is the 60 to 120 second version of why you're here and what you're looking for. So I will usually kick it off by asking the person to tell me why did they reach out for mentorship? What are they hoping to get out of it? Where are they in their legal career, and kind of see where it goes. I think that some mentees have a much clearer, like the one I just discussed, already has a summer associate position in a very specific practice area and was looking for guidance on that, very small box. Other mentees have come with casting a much wider net, whether they're, going to law school or about to go to law school. They have no idea what they want to do or what they even want to ask. And so I think letting the mentee set the stage for the flavor of the mentorship is a really good thing, because at the end of the day, this is 99% for the mentee, and whatever benefits the mentor gets out of it are kind of ancillary. So I think it's important to be flexible and to really, on the mentors, the mentee really needs to be able to speak and articulate why they're there. And the mentor really needs to be able to sit back and listen, actively listen, and figure out, whether the mentee knows what they want, or if they don't know what they want, what they think they want. So I think it's a very, active, passive type beginning, where the mentor really needs to soak that all up. Once you've kind of got all the basic information, I think it's going to come down to individual people's personality and experience, and also what the mentee needs. So I think that, but I do think that the opening for most of these sessions should be the mentee prepared to speak about themselves, why they're there, why they want mentorship, what they're hoping to get out of it, to sort of give a lay of the land for the balance of the meeting.
I agree with all that. I will sometimes open by very briefly talking about my own background, just for two purposes, really. One, I want to give a very concise version of what I'm hoping the mentee will tell me about themselves. So I sort of touch on, important career and personal points about myself in hopes that when they tell their story, they do the same. And then also I say, so, that's sort of my background. I'm happy to help in any way that I can. How do you think I might be able to be helpful? And I'm always happy to try and be useful. But if somebody's first question is, how do I become a big law bankruptcy partner? We're going to have to go on the assumption that I don't have any personal experience, and I've already let them know that. And I think it's really helpful, actually, to let your mentees know in advance what your own personal experience is and what you're talking to from personal experience and what you've just seen. Because I could certainly give some general advice on what I have seen for friends who are trying to make partner in big law, maybe even bankruptcy, but being really clear about what's speaking from personal experience and what I've just seen, so that I don't kind of lose credibility with a mentee by giving really specific advice about something I know nothing about.
Sharon?
So it's interesting to listen to both of you. I'm coming at it from a little bit of a different point of view, because I am not a practicing attorney. I actually coach people. So I love the fact that you guys are sharing your stories, but I agree that you have to ask them what their goals are, right? The goal for the mentoring to become a big partner, bankruptcy partner, that's a very lofty goal. And so asking them what their goal is from the relationship and their goals in their careers or whatever it is that they want the mentoring on. The mentoring might be, we could have law students that are first gen, and it's how to survive law school. It's how to study it, and nothing to do with actually practicing yet, because they're still just trying to get through a new experience. So what's their goal for the call? That would be something that I think we would focus on. And Matt obviously touched on that as well.
And as someone who teaches law students for a living, don't take anything for granted. One of the best parts about law school today is it if you've been out for a little while, it probably looks a little bit different. The student body, the curriculum looks a little bit different than when you were there. That's great. That's how our profession's going to grow and become richer and more diverse. But it also means that we can't take sort of assumptions for granted that these people know what to ask. And so that's a really important part too. Are there other sort of surprises that you've seen along the way about the kinds of advice that either people ask you or kinds of advice that you sort of proactively give them that might not be obvious to someone who's not used to sort of talking about it and doesn't have as many reps as Sharon and Heather and Matt do? Heather, I'm going to let you go first on that one.
Sure. I think one of the things that surprised me in terms of what mentees are looking for is they're often just looking for kind of an answer to a question that has no one right answer. At least that's what they think that they're looking for. And I try really hard, as a lawyer, I'm very much a problem solver. And I think like, oh, well, here are the 9 reasons you should do it this way. And my instinct is to give an answer, but that's never the most effective thing to do. So, looking out for those questions and helping them kind of weigh their priorities and think it through is something that I can do. And something I have to stop myself from doing is kind of leading them in the direction that I would choose, because I can't possibly know every factor that will be relevant to them, particularly if it's kind of a new mentee or someone who I don't know really well. But even after a while, it can be hard to know all the factors that might be relevant to a discussion or a decision that can be really big. It can be, should I stay in my lucrative big law associate position now as a 3rd year, or, go in-house because I have this opportunity and I don't know, whether I'll be able to get another one for a couple of years, that type of thing. That happened more before the legal market became what it is, but that type of thing where there's no right or wrong answer.
That's great. Sharon or Matt?
So for me, I do a lot of work with international students, international LLM students. So, and first gens. And so back to what I was saying before, sometimes, did everybody read Hillbilly Elegy or see the movie or whatever? There's scenes in that, the book is way better than the movie, but there's scenes in that where he just doesn't know what to do because he's never worked in that environment, lived in that environment. It's those givens that you were talking about, Jonah, about it. What law school used to look like isn't the same now. So that's not surprising to me. But what I see is it's surprising to other lawyers, because the assumption that they're coming from is that everybody knows these things. And executive presence, how we look when COVID hit and people didn't even bother to get dressed, we're going back to square one. Everybody knows what to wear to the office, but nobody knew what to wear on Zoom. And it was very important to communicate to people. You're still when it came back to doing online trials and stuff like that, you're still in front of judges, you're still in front of opposing counsel, you're still in front of clients. I'm going down the path here just to say everything about how you present yourself is what's surprising to me, because I was taught that as a child. A lot of people aren't taught that now. It's just not part of it. It's the dressing down of the United States. Back in the day, they used to say, Mr. So-and-so for the lawyer. You never called a lawyer by their first name. The world has changed. And so I think the more senior lawyers have difficulty understanding how to mentor younger lawyers who really just have completely different experiences, life experiences. So that's an interesting thing that I have seen. That was for me.
Matt, anything to add?
Yeah, the thing I was going to say before I was going to tell you all that I'm dressed up in my polo shirt right now. So maybe I resonate with some of these lawyers who don't want to get dressed and don't want to go to the office. And you can certainly, people call me Mr. Schwartz, and I kind of look around, see if my dad's there. Aside from, I agree, there is a bit of a gap there between, the old guard and the new guard. And, having been practicing for 21 years now, and being in my mid 40s, I feel like I'm kind of like sitting right in the bridge between them, where I could relate to the old guard and yet find myself much more attracted to the new in terms of, and now, and part of that too is part of my practice. But I think what I was going to say relates to that, which is that a lot of being successful as an attorney, particularly as a transactional attorney, I can't speak for a litigation attorney, is like, keep it simple, stupid. Everything you need to know you learned in third grade, right? A lot of it is about organization, being proactive, playing well in the sandbox, building relationships. I feel like a lot of the mentees come to me, and I think I've told this example before. I had someone come to me going, I'm going to do an internship and I'm going to be on this board and I'm going to do this and that and this and that and blah, 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 blah. And I was kind of like, dude, time out. Like, you're going to be studying for the bar exam. The only thing you should be doing is studying for the bar exam, 8 hours a day, take 2 hours a day to exercise and eat and sleep the other 12. You know what I mean? Some of it is just a matter of like toning things back, because I feel like, I don't know who's telling people this, whether it's just the availability of social media posts about it, the availability of materials. I didn't read a single treatise or take any classes that directly related to what I do in my practice while I was in law school. Today, I feel like people feel like they need to come out of law school already prepared, for some specific area of the law. And I think just taking a few steps back, understanding that law school is a broad education, understanding that there are basic human skill sets like listening, speaking, which is why I like to make the mentee, speak themselves, reminding yourself to listen, reminding yourself to be organized, to be proactive, to be focused on the task at hand. But, it's amazing how many times I've had someone go, oh yeah, I kind of just lost sight of those basic things in all of the craziness. So that's the thing to me that I feel has been the most interesting, is kind of to get back to basics. You shouldn't have to tell a law student to get organized, but sometimes they need to be told that, right? You shouldn't have to tell someone studying for the bar, like, this is your only job for 3 months. Sometimes people need to hear that. I think that having a more senior person tell them to relax a little bit and not get as hyper about, making their career happen instantaneously is something that I'm seeing as a common thread in my mentorship.
And sort of brass tacks, how do you all think about sort of providing this advice in a way that, to sort of echo what Heather was talking about, gives them options as opposed to just solutions? And as Matt was just talking about, sort of big picture as opposed to sort of always focusing on nitty gritty questions. How do you build that relationship sort of over time so that you're able to provide that kind of advice? Are there things that are particularly successful, or maybe mentoring techniques that you've used that have proved less successful that you thought intuitively might work, but in actuality were less helpful?
I just go for the brutal honesty. I mean, I try to be as honest as possible, even if I don't think the person's going to like the answer. Something Heather touched on before, which is, I have the benefit of being at a big law firm with lots of different resources and specialty areas. If someone asks me a question that's outside my specialty area, I direct them to either another person or to another resource. So I think, knowing your lane, I mean, for Heather, she has a much wider lane because she's an in-house counsel at a big company. So she has to answer all kinds of different questions. Whereas I'm like neck deep in the weeds in my particular niche of practice. So it's really going to depend for each mentor how broad a spectrum of questions you're able to answer. But I think not trying to be all things for all people, being able to go, hey, I know nothing about that, but let's look up a resource together. The other day on the phone, on this call, I just got on Google and was like, let me see what Google has to say about it. And I found a couple of links and send them to the mentee. I mean, not just because you're a successful attorney it means you don't know everything. So I think being able to let your mentee know that you don't know everything, and it's okay not to know everything. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to go to the librarian at your school and ask for resources. It's okay to go to the librarian at the firm that you're summering at. It's okay to go to the junior lawyers that you work with in your practice and ask them specific questions. So I think an encouragement to empower them to go beyond asking you is the best thing you can do versus just giving them the answer.
And don't you find that sometimes there's a fear level, though, of asking certain people? So obviously, I said before, I'm not a practicing attorney. So the type of mentoring I do is usually relationships. People are having problems with somebody that they're working for or with, and so they don't know how to deal with that relationship. And I was dealing with somebody who was a second career lawyer. So they were only a second year lawyer, but they were an adult person married with 2 children, and they were having difficulty just adjusting to being a lawyer, keeping time, and to their direct boss, because they didn't have that relationship in their previous career. So to Matt's point, I couldn't help this person with very specific legal things, but I could help them with what was in my wheelhouse. And so for the mentors out there who are nervous about, well, what if they ask me a question that I can't help? You can do exactly what Matt said. Say, well, let's bring in our labor attorney. Let me call my head of HR. Let me see, who could I introduce to our relationship to help us with what your situation is. That's good mentoring, as giving those contacts to other people who then become even more of their network, their mentors, their network, and all of that. So I think it's important not to fake it.
I agree with all of those. And I would just add, I think anytime I do end up giving specific advice rather than sort of let me help you think through this, I try to be really clear again on where I'm coming from. Both my professional background, and then like I grew up with privilege. I went to a top law school. There's all sorts of ways in which various privileges benefit me. And so when I say things like, well, that sounds like a horrible situation, I think I might choose to walk away, but I also understand that there are all sorts of privileges that allow me to do that in a way that not everybody might have that opportunity. And I think it's not serving anybody to ignore who you are or your perspective or privilege or lack thereof. And it can be awkward for the mentor. I think the first few times you have to put out there whatever it is about yourself, but it's really important if you want to be able to have an honest and open relationship to be clear on where you're coming from, where there may be differences, where there may be similarities in terms of that between you and your mentee.
Yeah, and that actually makes me think of a follow-up, which is sort of, have you ever had an experience? I think some people don't mentor because they have fears about the relationship, right? Either the person's going to want too much, the person's not going to want anything at all. It's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be not enough work. There's lots of potential pitfalls. And I think it's easy, especially for lawyers who are sort of typically type A people, to figure out all the reasons not to do it. How have you dealt with some of the challenges to the extent you've experienced them from your mentees?
I can go first on
Go
some
for
of
it.
this.
Yeah, please.
I kind of upfront, and this is not necessarily just with Legal Mentor Network mentees, this is generally get really clear on what I am and I'm not willing to do. I am not, for example, willing to miss my son's bedtime for a mentee. I'm not really willing to do much for work during that time unless it's really urgent. But setting clear boundaries so that I'm always kind of happy with the relationship and feel like it's not taking an advantage of me. Another thing that I mentioned to some of the people on this call that I've been kind of drawing lines with is I won't do a really close resume review. I will take a look, I will give general feedback, but it is not my specialty and it's really time consuming. I will provide resources of other places they can go, but just getting really clear, upfront with myself first, and then with the mentees about, how I view my role, what I can and can't do, I think helps make it a really productive relationship that's enjoyable for me and hopefully for the mentee as well.
Additions?
I agree with that. I think being, this is one of the reasons I like being brutally honest, because that's just who I am. And I think as long as you bring your authentic self to the mentoring and are willing to say like, hey, I don't know the answer to that, or I'm not the right person to help with that, it's very hard. It's very hard to mess it up because, you just do your best to try to give people what they need. I haven't had an experience where I had a mentee, get upset or push back or anything like that if I didn't have, time or energy for them. I haven't had that experience yet. Everyone I've mentored has been very thankful and grateful and respectful. And so I've had nothing but positive experiences on that front.
And to be clear, same, just it's like the yes person in me that has to draw those boundaries. It's not any mentee pushing a line.
And that's what the word I was going to use is boundaries. You just draw your boundaries with your mentees of what it's what they both have said. just what we're willing to do and what we're not willing to do. Sometimes I will get something and could you look at this for me before I hand it in or whatever? And I'll say, I'll look at it tonight, but I won't get back to you till tomorrow. Just,
This is a great place to point out that this is one of those places where mentoring helps the mentor, because as a mentor, setting boundaries with a mentee also helps with setting boundaries with clients, setting boundaries with family members, with friends. I mean, this is a great place to practice, what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do, and being okay with it, with a little bit of a dispassionate, it's someone you don't really know. So, if you have a trouble, being a little firmer, this is a great opportunity to just practice being a little firmer with someone who really needs it. So I think this is one of those places where mentoring is a great practice help for mentors.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And right, you don't have to be, as I think several of you have said in different answers, you don't have to be everything to everybody all the time. You are a mentor, not their mentor, capital M, maybe capital ENTOR also.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that others may have questions. So please feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A, and I promise I will raise them to the panelists. But I was hoping everybody could just give a story or an experience of a mentee-mentor relationship or moment that you found rewarding, that might be helpful to others who are sort of new to this and want to see what it looks like.
can I share one? Because I actually was going to make a comment. So I was mentoring this one individual who I knew their performance review was coming up, and they wanted me to look at their self-review before they handed it in. And the quote that says, "An emergency on your part is not a crisis on my part." So they didn't give it to me until the night before, or minutes before it was due or whatever. And I was like, I'm not going to have time to review it. And they were heartbroken and whatever. But then the next year, because I mentored this person for quite some time, we talked about it early enough, and I was able to actually go through it and help them present themselves in a better light and rethink how they were putting something forward. And they went off and they created it with enough time. And the next year, or not even next year, the next cycle, because it was, I think, every 6 months, it went much better. And so those boundaries help that person step up and not wait till the last hour to create their self-evaluation, and then got input on their self-evaluation. And so that was a really positive experience for me, and I think for the gentleman that I was helping at the time.
I can jump in with one that happened fairly recently. I was talking to a person who was trying to decide sort of what to do next, had a lot of available options, at least in theory. I was kind of talking through all of them with me. And then almost as an offhanded comment, mentioned this very, very specific out there area of law that I did not realize existed. And sort of started building on that and kept going back to it. And then at one point just went for 5 minutes, like lit up, talking about how exciting this area of law was. And I sort of said, well, can you do that as a career? I genuinely don't know. And she goes, I don't know, maybe I can. And it was so funny because it was something she'd been thinking about and had been, it turned out, blogging about, but just for fun, not connected to LinkedIn or anything. And so she went home and looked to see if it was something where there were actual careers you could have. And a few weeks later, she had a job doing it. And I really did nothing. All I did was listen, but in a way that probably a friend wouldn't, just because it's such a weird, artificially feeling conversation to have. So that was so cool for me. And that mentee continues to be happy in this new, very out there job.
Yeah. It's not one specific person, but I've had the same thing happen with 3 or 4 or 5 people where I've had someone call me. Look, I think law school does a very good job of preparing people for a litigation kind of practice, at least when I was there, or what I'm seeing, and not as much for a transactional style practice, in the sense that most people know what a litigator does. They write briefs, they go to court, most people have no idea what a transactional lawyer does all day long, or even what types of work are available. And so I think, the pattern that I've seen and that I love the most is I'll have someone tell me, hey, I know I don't want to be a litigator. I think I want to do transactional law. It's probably why they're paired up with me to begin with. These are the kinds of things I'm interested in. And then I can kind of run them through. Well, have you thought about this vertical of transactional law? Or what about this? Or what about this? Or what about this? And it's similar to the story Heather was saying in that, they don't even know what's out there. They have no idea what the actual options are, let alone how to do them. So I think the idea that you can open a mentee's mind to an area of practice that they didn't even know existed is really like the most rewarding thing I've seen so far. And I think that that's part of it, is that they just don't have someone to talk to who knows all about the landscape of what's out there. And then of course I've made referrals to other partners of mine, to lawyers in other firms. I'll give them a list of names of people to look up on LinkedIn and try to connect with. So just being able to, kind of frame the landscape of what's out there, even if it's not your area of expertise, for someone who has no idea what to even look for, that's a really great, a great outcome that I've seen multiple times in my my experiences.
Can I ask a quick question? Do you guys ever mentor people, law students, away from jobs that are, in a private law firm, or it's hard to get an in-house job with zero experience, but like to do government work, or like, do you guys ever guide them that way, or you wait to see sort of where you're talking about they don't know what jobs exist? So, people don't know you can work for, economic development department in a city and be a lawyer for them. Like, you don't know that job exists.
I mean, it's really kind of a question for Crystal, because the mentor network, i.e. Crystal, pairs people up as the requests come in. And I think what she tries to, I'll let her confirm, is pair people up with people who are in a similar industry.
Yes, we have about like 25 to 30 practice areas, which is really just what Google told me were the top 25 to 30 practice areas for a lawyer. But we also ask for additional comments. We ask all the mentees to say, is there anything else you'd like to tell us? And some people have nothing to say, and some people have a whole paragraph about specific areas of law that they're looking for, or this is their experience and this is what they want. They might want someone criminal. So we really try to take all that into consideration. And as of right now, all of the matches are done by hand, by law students and attorneys. So even if you're not a perfect fit, we think that you probably have some experience, as someone in the comments said, that can be helpful to your mentee.
And I'm sure, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine that there's so much of what Heather and Matt were just talking about is literally just listening, not giving advice so much as guiding the mentee to say the things that the mentee never even realized was in their head, and they've never said out loud to anyone. And it's being able to ask those questions, right? So if someone comes to Matt and says, I think I want to be a transactional lawyer, but I really don't want quick deadlines. I really don't want to do anything with math. I really don't want to do 5 things that Matt does every single day, right? If the best thing that person gets out of the experience is maybe they don't want to be a transactional lawyer, what do they want to do? I imagine that's a huge benefit as well. I mean, that's what I tell my students when they're going to their summer internships. If you learn that you never want to do that again, that was a valuable summer internship. Am I right on that, guys? I'm getting head shakes, so I'll take that as affirmance. All right, well, I don't see any new questions, so I'll ask sort of another practical question. One of the coolest parts about this network is it happened organically, and mostly happened with people who are not in the same place, or at least never met in person, right? This entire network happened in a time when we basically stopped seeing anybody. Now, hopefully we're moving to a time when we can start seeing people in certain ways, but I was hoping you might want to talk a little bit about the differences between sort of what some of us may have experienced of kind of in-person coffees, lunches, that kind of networking versus phone, online, email quick hit networking, and if there are differences that you've noticed now that you're on the mentor side.
I can share one thing that's different that I actually think is really cool is on the mentor side, the kind of online Zoom world makes the mentorship feel a lot less transactional. And what I mean is it's really about building a relationship and the mentee hopefully learning from the mentor, although inevitably I learn too, with no expectation that I will ever be able to connect the mentee to a job or hire him or her or anything like that, because half the time we're across the country. Now, the fact that we are now all online means there's a greater chance that I do now know somebody who can help the mentee get a job. But I think, when I think of in-person networking, when I was in law school in New York or even in Boston, where I am now, there was always more of a, well, do I know somebody who can help you? And how can I help you get a job? Or can I bring a client your way? And there was never an assumption that that would happen, but it was kind of in the background. And I just don't get the sense that any mentee has that type of expectation now. And I think that that's great. I think it leads to different, more honest questions. And I don't know, it kind of feels better. It feels like a more meaningful relationship than some of the like, can I pick your brain coffee dates do? Which, to be clear, is different than the organic mentorships that develop when you're working with somebody or really know them well in person.
I think the issue is the organic ones don't happen anymore because you're not in the office meeting people, and we're not going to events where we're meeting people. You end up sitting next to somebody at a round table and you hit it off. So it's not happening. So we don't have access to it. So the creation of this network was like the perfect timing to take this crazy environment we have and make sure networking is still happening. So I think that that's a real blessing that the network was created.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, there's going to be a time soon when people get back to in-person networking. It's interesting because on one hand, mentoring is an opportunity to practice your networking in a very safe environment. On the other hand, it takes a lot more time to go to a coffee meeting than it does to do a Zoom or a quick phone call. So I think there are pluses and minuses. The pluses being that I can mentor more people. It's easier for them to get access. I can mentor people all over the country. The minus being you're not getting that practice of, giving your elevator pitch in person or talking in person. So it's kind of a balance. And I think that, especially if you're going to be a lawyer in private practice, you're going to want to meet your clients in person. You're going to want to grab coffee with them. You're going to want to meet the people you work with. But at the same time, it is democratizing and enabling, greater disbursement of information. So there's definitely, there's a plus and a minus to the way we're going to be doing this for a while.
And it sounds like from all of you that you think there's going to be room for both going forward, and that the move back in person we may not lose this sort of other mentoring that allows us to do it on our commutes or, at other times. I know Brian, who's one of the co-founders, just blocks off time in his calendar every single day or every single week. And that's mentoring time. And that's sort of how he fills it up. And I think people are more and more people are doing that. And that's fantastic, including the people on this panel. We do have a couple of last questions before the end. So I'll just raise it from the group. Kevin writes, talk about approachability, vulnerability, and authenticity from a mentor's perspective, specifically how you might share a challenge or a failure and how that might impact your relationship with a mentee. Anybody, go for it.
We're talking about our own personal challenges or failures?
I read it. Yeah, I read it as how do you talk about your own sort of missteps on your journey as a way of talking to your mentees, or if you do provide that vulnerability. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be willing to, for sure, if I thought it related to what the person is trying to do. Just like, for instance, my bar exam example, had I not focused myself completely on the bar and not passed it the first time, like I know people who didn't, I'd be willing to share that. I think it just all depends on where the person's at, what their stage is, what their goals are for the mentorship, how you perceive them, what the things they need are. So yeah, I mean, I think being vulnerable to an extent and look, people ask me what the key skills are to being a good lawyer, and I will tell them that one of the three keys is being okay making mistakes and learning from your mistakes. So I'll add on to that is also talking about them. So I think that, if you're especially as a more senior lawyer, if you're succeeding, that's because you've made mistakes and you learn from them. Now, discussing them may be more challenging, but that's an area for mentors, especially, to grow in this process, right? So it's a safe place to maybe bring that out into the open, because even if you learn from your mistakes, you don't necessarily tell anybody about them. It may be something that nobody knew about. So I think that it's definitely an opportunity to be vulnerable. And I think that the more vulnerable you are, the more you're going to get out of it.
Anybody else?
Totally agree with what Matt said.
Okay, great. I have a couple last questions in the chat. One of them asked about sort of frequency of contact, sort of how often do you reach out to your mentees, and also sort of if we're level setting for our mentees, how often do we expect them to reach out to us? Yeah, so I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on that. Maybe Sharon or Heather could start.
I'll start with this because one of the things I say to people I'm mentoring is this relationship is for you. And so you have to take responsibility. It's teaching them skills, right? You have to take responsibility for reaching out to me. Now, granted, if I don't hear from somebody in a month, I might send a little email that just says checking in ? And prod them a little bit, but it's their responsibility to reach out to me in this kind of organic relationship. That's how I feel, but I never let it go too far without pinging, because in today's world, you don't know what, somebody could get COVID, somebody could have a death in the family, somebody, but within a month or 2 months, I would ping if I hadn't heard from them.
I agree. I think, the mentee really should be taking the lead on reaching out, particularly when they need something. I think it's lovely if, I'm just looking at the chat, they want to reach out and just update on their life or greetings for the holidays. That's great. It's by no means required in my mind. But I think a lot of times I find in my personal relationships where I'm a mentee, those are great excuses to get back in touch with somebody. And I would strongly encourage any mentee to do the same, like Happy New Year. And by the way, this is what's going on in my life. And
I have to say, as a mentor, I want to know, did they pass the bar, right? If you've been coaching them to study for the bar, tell me.
Yeah, and I agree with that. It's, I never reach out to anyone I'm mentoring. They have to be proactive in reaching out to me. It's they're coming to us. The mentee is coming to the mentor for guidance. The mentee should be initiating the activity. How often, is really up to the personal relationship. I would say, the first call or two, maybe a call or meeting or two, and a month, maybe a month after the first one if you want. And then after that, it should probably be sporadic depending on what you need. I think email is a great follow-up tool if there's a quick question, and if you want to schedule a follow-up a month or two later, that's fine. But I think you should expect to talk to your mentor 1, maybe 2 times, to get you going on your way. And then, some frequency thereafter, depending on what the mentee needs. But it's certainly not don't expect you're going to be talking to someone every week or every couple of weeks, and they're not going to reach out to you and get a regular time on the calendar. This is, 100% on the mentee to reach out to the mentor and stay in front of them if they want the mentorship.
And it's probably good, I would imagine, to sort of at the end of the call, sort of figure out what the next action item is and sort of say, the next time we meet will be when you reach out, just to sort of make those unspoken rules spoken for all the reasons we talked about earlier. Can't hurt, certainly, I imagine.
Yeah, I think setting expectations is key.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think we're coming up right against our time. So I'm going to turn it back over unless anybody has any last comments or questions I
do.
missed. Sharon, go for it. Yes,
I want to
please.
read a list of best practices. Is that all right?
Please.
Okay,
Love
best
it.
practices. Establish rapport. I think we've talked about that a lot. Ask good questions. I believe we've discussed that as well. Be a good listener, right? We've talked about that. Provide constructive feedback on maybe what they're saying and give them guidance. Meet regularly to the agreed point and actually in person if possible. And then the one thing that we didn't talk about is maintain confidences. I think that's an important key to the mentor-mentee relationship is they feel that they can share their concerns, their problems, their issues, and that unless there's something that creates a real issue for you ethically, that you don't take it to anybody else. That's it.
Any other best practices you all want to add? All right. I think with that, then I was going to turn it back to Crystal sort of to remind us, if you haven't signed up, please do legalmentornetwork.org. And if you have signed up, find a few other people at your law firm to sign up as well. By making it open that you're doing it, it's much more likely that somebody else will do it. But anything else, Crystal, in sort of logistics or trying to make it happen?
And just to follow up, I put in the chat, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear how your relationships are going, successes, fails. Let us know how you think is helping or how you think we can better support you as a mentor and grow these relationships.
Yeah, it's a brand new organization and doing incredible amounts of work with mostly Crystal's work behind the scenes. So thank you to Crystal for all the hard work you do. Thank you all for being here. Thanks to the panelists. I imagine, we'll find other ways to connect to mentors in the future. If you need help mentoring, we're here, right? And I think that should be, said as well. So any other last comments? I'm just checking the chat.
I just wanted to jump in that we're not really discussing right now, but and it's not really what we do here at the Legal Mentor Network, but to the extent that you find that your mentee is having mental health issues or concerns, there are a lot of organizations that do help in these areas, and you can reach out to us and we'll put you in touch with them. That's not what we're doing here, but we did want to just raise the red flag as a mentor. People can unload different issues on you. So something to be aware of, and we would love to be a resource for you.
Fantastic. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sharon and Matt and Heather and Crystal. And thank you all for taking the time out of your day and go out and mentor. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Okay,
Fiona.
see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Crystal. Bye-bye, everybody.